My wife, 28 female, and I, 35 male, rented our first apartment from someone she knew. We moved in right after our honeymoon. She told me she knew the apartment manager because he was friends with her dad, so he was willing to rent to us for cheap. He owned 2 apartment buildings across the street from each other. They were really nice quality, just 7 minutes from downtown. We couldn't have found a better place to live in the area. I didn't ask questions, I was just happy and hopeful for our future. With this affordable rent, we were going to have money to travel and do fun things with my days off work. My wife said she was going to get a job, but she was looking and trying to figure it out for 8 months after we moved in. I was getting frustrated because of that, and because the apartment manager would come over every Monday to check on the condition of the apartment. I knew this was way too often. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but my wife said it was stated in the lease. I trusted her and let it go. I was at work every Monday anyway, so it was my wife's responsibility to keep the house clean and put up with him. I had no idea what was really going on. On a Thursday, I was getting our mail out of our tiny locked box when the neighbor joined me. He asked me why the apartment manager visited our apartment so often. I was confused and told him the apartment manager came over every Monday to check out our apartment. He was surprised and asked me why in tarnation he had to do that when he only checked his apartment every 4 months. Instantly, I started to panic. If it wasn't for inspection, why was he visiting my wife weekly while I was at work? She was always the one communicating with him. She told me she tried to ask him if he could come a little less frequently, but he refused and reminded her that he had to follow the lease. I checked the lease and found that someone scribbled out the original type and instead wrote every Monday. I had to figure out what was going on, but I didn't want to tell my wife I suspected her of anything. I found the apartment manager's online profile and noticed my wife's dad wasn't on his friends list, but she was. On Saturday, I found the same neighbor at the mailbox. I thanked him for asking me about the landlord because I had no idea I was being lied to. He sympathized and asked me what I was going to do next. I asked his advice, so he suggested I pretend to go to work on Monday, but actually just sneak inside his apartment until the apartment manager showed up. It was perfect. I did exactly that, watching through the window until he showed up and joined my wife inside. I waited 15 minutes before I decided to go in. The neighbor wished me luck and suggested I record the whole thing. I thought that was a great idea. I walked across the street, recording, and quietly unlocked my door. As soon as it cracked open, I saw them having sex in our living room, on the couch my parents bought us. I rushed in, screaming. My wife threw a blanket over him and tried to ask me what I was doing back home. I could hear in her voice that her heart was pounding, and she was gasping between sentences. Her hands were shaking. I asked why she had the apartment manager under a blanket. She was speechless, and that's when he decided to run, butt naked, escaping out the window. He got in his car and sped away while my wife started begging me to stop recording and forget about this. She said it was the first time they tried anything, and I got there before it actually happened. I told her I wasn't stupid, that if he'd been coming over every Monday while I was at work, this was not the first time they tried anything. I just discovered their affair. She tried to say no, but she was crying and flustered, just like she was guilty. She followed me around while I gathered my stuff, begging me to delete the video because it would ruin AP's life if people thought he slept with her and violated the lease. I said I'd consider it if she answered some of my questions. In desperation, she agreed to tell me the truth. AP wasn't a friend of her dad's, he was her ex. She dated him for years and met me right after they broke up. He offered us cheap rent so he could try to sleep with her every Monday, but she denied him every time until today. I couldn't believe a word she said. No matter what she told me, I had to divorce her. I wouldn't trust her ever again. I believe she slept with him several times, if not every Monday. If I tried to stay with her, every time I'd leave for work, I'd be sweating bullets, wondering if she had another guy at our house. I told her my fears and reasoning before I said divorce and left. She followed me outside, screaming for me to delete the video. It caused quite a scene. AP called me the next day to try to bribe me. He wanted me to delete the video so badly that he offered me $50,000 to do so. He added that this affair was all my wife's doing. She changed the lease so I'd believe their story. I said I didn't care and pointed out that he'd have no way of knowing if I actually deleted the video from all my devices. Since that wouldn't work out, I sued the apartment manager for violating the Fair Housing Act. This automatically broke the lease, returning the security deposit back to me. I left my ex-wife living there without a lease. She mooshed off AP for several months after the court hearing, forcing him even deeper into debt. She didn't have any credit to get approved for a lease in her own name, so she was eventually forced to leave, but it took a while. By the time she was forced out, he resented her because of the problems she caused him. He'll be in debt until he dies. OP, I am so sorry your wife did this to you. You trusted her and what she said, only for her to lie and cheat on you. She accepted this rental discount even though it would put her closer to her ex. It takes a very naive person to think it's okay to keep close contact with their exes. Whether she started it or not, she made very bad decisions. It's lucky the neighbor asked you why AP was coming over so much. Thanks to his observations, inquiry, and suggestions, you found out the truth about your wife and AP. You did right by leaving her and taking him to court. She doesn't seem like the kind of woman to suddenly stop lying and cheating. She continued seeing AP until they were caught red-handed, and she wouldn't have stopped otherwise. You don't deserve a woman that does this to you, and now you have a fresh start. I wish you the best of luck in life and thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I lived a busy life in New York City. We met on the sidewalk one day when we were both hailing a cab. We shared one, and as soon as we started talking, I knew I wanted to see her again. Through our dating and newlywed years, our lives fit really well together. We were both work-oriented and kept the same routine and jobs. She worked as owner and manager of a laundromat her dad used to run. My wife and I both worked 9 to 5. I felt pretty lucky because I got to work with my best friend every day. He was a lawyer in demand, so he paid me extremely well to operate as his assistant. My wife and I both took taxis to work every day. Even though it was expensive, it was way cheaper than paying for 2 cars. She would budget every month and routingly freak out about how much we were spending on cab fare alone. I always assured her we were fine, and we always had enough at the end of the month. It was around January that my wife suddenly stopped worrying about money. She didn't even bother to do the budget, and at first I was glad she wasn't worried, but then she started coming home a little bit later than me. Not by much, but it was different, so I wondered if she was up to something. Not even 2 weeks later, she came home from work late and extremely anxious. I asked her what was wrong, and she swore it was nothing, just a bad day. She got in the shower and went to bed. Her distant and fishy behavior continued for weeks. She kept going to work and staying out later. She would stay in the bathroom for long amounts of time, and she didn't look at me the same way anymore. I asked her many times what was wrong. She only said she wasn't feeling good and had a doctor appointment scheduled. I asked more about it, like what exactly was wrong, but she wouldn't tell me. Days turned into weeks. She looked ashamed, embarrassed, and tired, completely different from her normal self. I asked her every day if she had her doctor's appointment yet, and she kept saying no. She was just buying time because she didn't want to tell me what was going on. After a month of odd behavior and no intimacy, I cornered her to demand answers. She broke down sobbing. I knew it was going to be bad. She told me she started sleeping with her taxi driver for free rides to and from work. I started to freak out, but she said there was more. She went to her doctor with bad symptoms, got tested, and found out she contracted a deadly disease. That's when I really freaked out. I asked how she could be so stupid. She just cried and apologized, defending herself by saying she was going through enough karma now with her diagnosis. I told her I couldn't keep living with her, and I'd certainly never sleep with her again. She cried hard, collapsing. I started packing my stuff. After a few minutes, she suggested we just use condoms from now on, so we could stay married. I cursed at the thought and told her she needed to seek medical treatment. I reminded her this only happened to her because she cheated on me for free taxi rides. It sounded so stupid when I said it. It was hard to believe this was real. While I packed my stuff and on the way out, I called her all kinds of names and told her what a horrible mistake I made marrying her. The room was spinning, my blood pressure was off. She was crying and wailing, so embarrassed by her actions and consequences. She begged me not to tell anyone what happened, especially not her dad. Well, I didn't tell her dad, but he found out because she tried to sue the taxi driver and get him fired. In all that mess, he heard the truth about her diagnosis and the real reason why they had sex, because she wanted free taxi rides. He made the decision to hire someone more responsible and healthy to operate the cleaners. The last time I saw her was when she asked me to take her to the hospice clinic. I dropped her off and never went back. It wasn't until I got moved into my new place that the divorce became final. Thankfully, I still have my wonderful job and good health after this whole ordeal. I try not to think about what would have happened if she tried to seduce me before I knew the truth. OP, I am so sorry your wife cheated on you with a taxi driver. That alone is reasonable enough to divorce her and never sleep with her again, but she also got a disease. The life you built together was instantly thrown away by her choice to have sex with a stranger. Thankfully, she wasn't heartless enough to sleep with you after cheating. Infidelity isn't just gambling your relationship, it's taking a huge risk with you and your spouse's health. By making the decision to sleep with him, your wife put saving money on cab fare above her dignity and you, her husband. You absolutely made the right decision to separate from her, move out, and let her go. She brought you both into an unforgivable reality, where divorce was the only option. Don't let this woman take away the hope you have of finding an honorable wife in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.